Hello, everyone, and welcome to the version 13 preview for Envisioneer. I'd like to welcome everyone for joining us today. I thank you for taking out of your time to see all the new features that are going to be in version 13. There's some exciting new features, and I'm glad you can join me today for the preview. Version 13 will be available within this quarter. We're finalizing our beta testing. It's going through beta testing through our internal channels, and we will be sending out more information about its availability within this quarter so that you have more information about that. During today's broadcast, I'm going to show you a sneak preview of all of the various new features that we have for version 13. And then following the broadcast, I'll be sending you out an email where you can watch the video of all of the new features. And we have a page created as well so that you can read about all of the new features. So you're well informed about what's coming out next in version 13. So with that, I'm going to get started and go right through all of the new features for you. And at the very end, if there is time, I will take any questions that you might have about the new features and how they work. So first of all, for usability, we have put in two different settings dialog boxes now. Before, all of the different commands for the different settings were all in the program settings dialog box. And now we've separated program settings, which will affect how the program runs, in one dialog box. And then to make it simpler for everyone, we've put all of the different settings that affect the document, the current project that you're working on, in a separate dialog box. So this will make it easier for you to find all of the different settings that you want to change and which ones are affected by the document itself and which ones are affected by the overall program. In the document settings here in this dialog box, you can see some different new ones that may have creeped up. Drawing aids, building aids, they've always been with us. But if I look down towards the bottom part of this list, we notice now that we have auto place outlets. This is a new utility in version 13 that we're quite excited about to help you in your speed in creating projects and make you more productive, is placing electrical outlets around an entire room. So in the settings of the document, you would select the outlet that you want to use, and this is directly hooked up to the catalog. So you would go into the catalog, select the outlet, and then according to your own personal preferences or your local building codes, you would tell it the spacing along the wall, the maximum distance from an outlet that you can have between outlets, and the maximum distance from an opening that you would like to have an outlet. Using these three settings in here and the outlet that you've chosen, it'll automatically place them around a room for you. So let me show you how to use that one. I'm going to go up to the Interiors tab, and under the Interiors tab, I'm going to choose Auto Place Outlets. This will also highlight another new feature in the software that as I highlight over a room now and I'm selecting the room that I want to place the outlets in, you can see that that room is going to highlight for me. So this will make it easier when you're auto inserting things like ceilings or floors or the electrical tool that I'm showing you today to know which room they're going into. And this will also allow you to highlight. So if you thought that this was supposed to be two rooms and perhaps you have a small gap between the walls and it shows as one room, you can see, oh, I think I have an issue with one of my walls. It's not connecting at a corner because it's showing all as one room instead of two. So that will allow you to highlight things like that. So I'm going to select this one room. All I have to do is left click inside it. And then if I zoom in nice and close, you can see that electrical outlets are all the way around that room. So this will help you to place those elements. And I'm just going to hit cancel here to end it. So it followed the rules that I set in the program settings, and I have outlets automatically placed around the room. Even though they were automatically placed around the room, you can still go in and move them if you need to, or duplicate any one of them if you need more electrical elements. This will just help you get the bulk of those outlets in quickly so you can be efficient in your work. I'm going to pop this out now into a 3D view, and I'm going to put this into a hatch pattern view. When we're putting in hatch patterns for walls and columns and different elements, before the hatch pattern was put on the same layer as the elements. So the hatch pattern for walls was given the same properties as the wall itself. So when it was transferred over to working drawing sheets, it had the same line weight and line color. Now, if I look at the properties of this wall, you'll notice that there's a difference here in just the tabs that are available at the top. We have, again, for clarity, separated the appearance tab. So we have the 3D appearance of the different elements and what they're going to have as their material under the appearance tab. And then we have the line work tab. And part of the line work tab is the hatch pattern. And if I'm looking at the hatch pattern of my exterior surface, you'll also see now below that it's put on its own unique layer. So hatch patterns going to a layer will allow you to have better looking drawings, because the hatch can be on a nice light layer when it goes on to the working drawings, and it's not going to be on the same layer as walls. This was a really heavily requested option by many end users around the world, and I'm glad that we're able to put it in there for you so that your working drawings are going to look even more professional now as the hatch is on a different layer. So for all the different elements, different walls, columns, they can now put their hatch and associated with it onto a separate layer for you. I'm going to cancel out of here, and I'm going to put us back into a 2D view. For the preview, I'm going to be bouncing around from different elements for the different features that we have. Depending on the version of the software that you have, you might have our construction suite, Envisioneer Construction Suite. You may be an Envisioneer Building Essentials client, or you may own Personal Architect or Pro Architect. So depending on the version that you have, some of these features will be available to you. They'll all be available to those that have Construction Suite, because it is our most robust software. But the other software products may not have all of the functionalities that I'm showing you today. So when I do send you out the email afterwards that points you towards the web address where I've laid out all of the various new features, there will be a guide on that sheet, on that web page, that shows you which features are available in which product. So if you are a Pro Architect client and wondering, will I have some of this functionality, you can refer to the website and that will tell you which ones have which. I just go down to the foundation plan at this point and zoom back out. And you'll notice on my foundation plan that I have a series of columns placed in here. What I'd like to do is put footings underneath all of these columns to support them. So I'm going to go back to the building tab, where we've always had our footings command, and mono footings attached to columns has always been there. But what we've upgraded for version 13, now if I right click before attaching it to a column, you'll notice I have the option to attach to all similar. Before we had to individually pick on all of the different columns, but now with attached to all similar, I select one of the columns and you'll notice that all of them get footings at the same time. Again, this is a productivity enhancement for version 13 to help you get your drawings out quickly. The one thing I've heard throughout this year is everyone is busy and they need to be more efficient in their design work. So when we were looking at new features for version 13, we really had an emphasis on those that are going to help you save time. Like this simple little tool, but this is going to help save you time. Like the auto insert electrical elements, again, things that make a simple process much easier by doing multiple things at the same time. I'm going to right click, hit finish here. I'm not going to do any more footings, but I am going to pop us back into a 3D perspective view to look at our model again in 3D. And this time I'm going to put it into what we call a realistic view that was introduced in version 12. So you can see the shades and shadows coming through and the material. In version 13, we've spent a lot of time again looking at the materials. One request that we had from many different users was when they're going to create renderings, they wanted to be even more realistic than what we were achieving before. To do that, we had to make sure that the materials that were being used in a model were more realistic. So I'm looking right now at this brick, and I'm going to right-click and look at the properties of this wall and go to the Appearance tab, where again, we're looking at the materials used in the 3D. And you can see that the exterior surface is this brick 9. I'm going to go out and look at the properties by editing material of this brick 9. Here you can see a big difference. If you're looking and have looked in the past at material properties, this is an entirely new dialog box. We're giving you more controls for your materials. So for those of you that really want a high-end looking rendering, you can take advantage of all the different material properties we put in now. One of the big new features is bump mapping. For those of you familiar with bump mapping, what that allows it to do is to create in a surface like something like brick, where you have the mortar joint, the ability to show crevices and indentations and things and materials that have bumps and crevices in them. By bump mapping them out, you can show which materials are coming in and out of that one simple material that you've chosen, like brick, but it can have the real definition now of the mortar versus the brick. And if there is a crevice in the brick, the bump mapping helps to show that. So we have the bump textures ability in here and the bump scale. There will be, of course, as in all of our dialog boxes, help with that. So you can click on that help button to understand all of the different bump texture information there, the emissive, opacity, specular, reflection properties that you can now put to a material. But what we've done to make this all easier for those of you that just want a good looking texture and maybe not want to dive in and play too much with the bump mapping and all of the different settings, is we put them into different property uses for you, from a generic material type, a diffuse, a Lambert, and a Fong. And these will give the material a good looking appearance in your 3D renderings and 3D model navigation. But for those of you that really like high-end renderings and know what you're doing with materials or want to learn, you've got lots to play with now to make them look very photorealistic and very realistic when you're walking through the model as well. As always, every week, for those of you that have sat in on our weekly Tuesday webinars at 2 o'clock Eastern time here in North America, we go over different features of the software every Tuesday. And one of our upcoming webinars will be on material properties. So if you are going to be a version 13 client, you can look forward to that webinar where we'll go through all of these various settings so that you can learn about them as well. I'm going to hit cancel here to get out of this dialog box so that you can go on and see more features. Another feature that we've put into version 13, for those that are using the software for quantity purposes, I'm going to select the windows in the software. I'm going to say select all similar. All of the similar windows of that size are selected. I'm then going to right click and say generate an estimate. All I want the estimate to be about are those windows. So now we have partial quantities. So if you just want to run a quick estimate, if you're sitting down with a client and they say, well, how much are those windows all going to cost? I can do a partial quantity. Or maybe they're doing a remodel and they want to, well, what if we don't do the windows? What if we don't do those columns? How much material is involved in just those different elements that you've selected? Partial quantities will allow you to do that very efficiently, break down an estimate and just estimate certain areas of your project so you're not doing everything. I'm quite excited about that one for our estimators using Envisioneer. This will allow them to go through and just estimate certain elements on the fly as they need to. We'll also be introducing for version 13 tally. So when you have manufactured products like LVL and PSL products, instead of just getting the total linear footage, we'll also break it down as a tally in the length of each one of those products too. I'm going to put this back down into a 2D view, and I'm going to switch it to our ground floor and look at our full floor plan here. And I'm just going to zoom in on that one room we've been looking at with the outlets where I've already put in a ceiling. I'm going to select that cathedral ceiling that I put in. I'm going to right click and I'm going to look at its properties. When previously, before version 13, you were putting in a cathedral or a tray ceiling, you were limited in your slope type to only have degrees. So for those of you that are in different areas of the world where you wanted to put them in as a percentage or you wanted to put them in as a slope in 12, it wasn't available. So now what we've done in version 13 is made those the same options that you have been enjoying with the roof. So if you have specified your roof is a 6 and 12, you can now put your ceiling in as a 6 and 12 and not do the math of, well, what slope degrees is that or what percentage is that? That can all happen. So the same slope types that are available in the roof are now available in the ceilings, so you don't have to start doing some conversions between both of them. So I hope you enjoy that new feature. I'm going to get out of here and again pop us into a 3D view to look at our model. And while I'm out here looking at our model, I'm going to take a look at the roof specifically and the framing of this portion of the roof. So keep your eye on this gable end as I go up to View, Framing, Display the Framing. What we've introduced now for version 13 is ladder framing. So you will have specifications in your roof that allow you to tell it about the ladder framing you want to do on gable ends. So if I get out of the framing here and display all but the framing, select the roof and look at its properties, we've always had the specify framing button down here, but now looking down towards the bottom, we now have gable ladders. So you can tell it that, yes, I do want to include gable ladders. What member size do I want to use for that? What piece of lumber am I going to grab to do the ladder framing? What do I want to call it? I'm going to call it bracing here as my usage. And what phase of construction is it going to be used in so that it can be organized correctly in the ultimate material report, and what spacing do I want it to have? So automatic gable framing will give us, again, more ease of use of putting in that gable framing and more accurate quantities if you've left it out in the past but knew you were going to have it. Now you can have that ladder framing on the ends of your gable ends. I'm going to put this back down into 2D. Speaking about roof framing, we've also introduced 2 new commands. I'm going to zoom in on this front portico area that we have. And for that, I'm going to go up to the members command. And under the members command, I'm going to use timber frames. With timber frames, if you're looking over to the right in your catalog panel, you'll see that timber frames means trusses. How exciting. So we have different truss capabilities now. So if I right click on this cathedral truss that's part of the catalog, you can see all the different options you have to be able to put in this timber framed truss system that you want, or it can be as your last type there, just an open frame. And all of the different settings that allow you to come through and customize the look of that truss, all of the different members available in it for your different chord values, the different slopes that are in it, so you can really detail out the truss and the members that are being used for your webbing and your cords, so it can put in automatically your truss for you. So let's take a look on how that's done. The information with that truss that I was just looking at included information about the overall span of that truss and the slope value. So I'm going to be putting it into this area right here that I knew was 10 foot 8 wide, and I made that cathedral truss 10 foot 8 wide. And I knew that it was a 6 and 12 slope. So that cathedral truss is a 6 and 12 slope. So from there, all I have to do when I select that cathedral ceiling is say, well, where do I want it to start from? So I'm going to go right from the middle part of this wall, start the span there. and end the span up here. And it'll automatically put in our trusses for me. And all I have to tell it is, well, where do I want them inserted now? And I'm going to say right there on the center. So now those trusses, that cathedral truss, is now part of my room in here. So if I go back into a 3D view, and I'm going to place a camera in here, we can see the trusses all going up through there. So if I do a look around, we can see those trusses going through. So that's exciting for those of you that want to add in that extra little detail to your models, to be able to show any timber framing that you're going to be doing, trusses that you're going to be showing in an open space. So now you can show that detail in your models very easily, just by taking the truss itself in the catalog and making sure that it matches the components that you're going to be using in a certain situation, and the spans and the slope values, and then just picking where it starts and where it stops, and they'll automatically go in for you. And when I'm looking at these trusses themselves and the details that you're putting in, because it's calling out these individual members that we're using, you can see that it's also got quantity information on it as well. So if you wanted to quantify each individual member that's going into that truss, you can do that so that they'll appear in your material report as well. So that's quite exciting, quite a great new tool that we've been able to create for you. For those of you that wanted to use trusses more for the profile, you wanted to show where the layout is going to be on the roof itself, more for a schematic purpose, so that you knew where all your hold downs are going to be required, and just to show out the general layout. I'm going to go up to my second floor and show you another routine that we have specifically for trusses, and I'm just going to zoom in here. Under the roof tool, you'll now notice at the very bottom of the different options that we have for the roof, you'll now see that we have truss run. So when I choose truss run, this command allows me to go to one edge of the roof, and when I go towards that end, you'll see that a green arrow appears. All I have to do is left click there to say, yes, I'd like to start my truss run from here. And then as I pull down, you can see that it's automatically putting the trusses in on my span. And I'll say I want to maybe stop it right there. And then I can come to another area of the roof, and that will have a green arrow as well. And I can show where I want it to start and stop as well. I'm just going to right click and hit cancel there. So I've got my truss runs in there, and it will show you the shape of the roof that it needs to put in that area. It automatically recognizes that I'm in a hip area or in a gable area, and will automatically change the look of the truss as it needs to go into that particular situation. So this will modify the trusses automatically based on the shape of the roof above it, and put in a profile. So the profile that it's putting in here will come through and match the shape of the roof that it's underneath. Okay, so if I looked out in a 3D view, and I'm going to come to my view framing, display framing, my trusses won't turn on it right away. But if I come down here to my view filter, I can turn on roofs, and underneath roofs, you'll now see trusses, and I'll turn on trusses, and you'll be able to see the truss profiles that I put through as well. Okay, so truss profiles going through, automatically recognizing the shape of the roof that they're sitting underneath and changing their profile accordingly so that you can see the layout and where they're going to be sitting. And we also have the timber frame trusses that were put in as well. I'm going to go back to the view filter dialog box, go back underneath roofs, turn off my trusses. But while I'm in this dialog box, I also want to show you that another change that we've made for version 13, I'm going to go to the notation tab, and in there you'll see the ability to turn off the visibility of elevation marks and section marks. Before, these were housed in a separate dialog box. And what we heard from our clients was that when they were transferring the model to the working drawing space, oh, I forgot to turn off the section marks, or I wanted to see that section mark or the elevation marks on or off. They had to go back to the model, turn them back on or off, and then go back through that same process. So what we've done to make that simpler and take off the confusion of how to turn the section and elevation marks off is to put them in the exact same dialog box, the view filter. So now you can turn off and on the visibility of elevation marks and section marks within this dialog box. So it's much easier finding that control, and you don't have to worry about when you're transferring this to working drawings about going out and changing it in a different dialog box. It's all in the same dialog box for you now, just to make life simpler for you and ease of use again. So I'm going to go back in there and turn off trusses, click OK, and view, framing, display all but the framing to get our whole model back. I'm going to put this back into 2D just for simplicity. Another thing that we've heard quite a bit from clients is the ability to change the catalog items. You want more control of being able to edit the catalog items en masse. So if I had maybe a different price for different elements that I wanted to change, or I needed to change things quickly, they wanted to be able to change the entire catalog very quickly. So now what we've done for version 13 is file catalogs, giving you the ability to export your catalog items. This will take every item in your catalog and spit it out into a text file. So if I say export catalog items, it'll allow me to save it somewhere. I'll save it under my desktop as a test file. I'm just going to hit cancel here because I already have it open for us for simplicity. And then I could open that up in Excel. So here is my entire catalog as an Excel spreadsheet. We had that ability before, but what we didn't have before was the ability to match that up with certain items. So this very first line that you see, this column of information, is actually the ID number that is in the background of each element in Envisioneer. So a window will have, for programming purposes, an ID number behind it. So when I'm exporting this element out, it's going to recognize this ID number. It's a window, it's a hopper window, it's 2'6" by 2'6". If I wanted to change any information about it, the size of that window, the price of that window, the style of that window, I can make that change. And when I import it back in, it recognizes that this ID number, and it updates that window for me in my catalog. With the same thought in mind, if I wanted to take that window and make a copy of it and add it into my catalog as well, I can create and copy this window, changing this ID number, and it will come in as a brand new element in my catalog. So you can update the existing elements by not touching this first column of information, or you can duplicate them to create new catalog elements on the fly in this spreadsheet and give it on a new ID number so that it creates a new element automatically for you. It'll come in and know it's a window and the size that you put into it, and it'll automatically create it for you. So for those of you that are using Envisioneer for estimating purposes, I see this as a big gain for you, that you'll have this one comprehensive spreadsheet that you can have and update the pricing on, and then just import it back in. So not only can we export it out of Envisioneer, we also give you, under the catalog controls, the ability now to import it back in. So you can import that spreadsheet back in with all of your changes so that your pricing is updated on the fly for you. So you don't have to go through every individual element in Envisioneer now when you have price changes, or you want to make a general change to a lot of elements at the same time. Do that in the spreadsheet view and then import it back in. That's going to be a huge game changer for those of you that are using Envisioneer for estimating purposes. It'll give you the ability to update those prices very quickly on the fly. I just wanted to highlight another option for those of you that are using it for estimating purposes. If I go and go to my Generate Project Estimate screen, where we look at the estimate for this, part of the templates that we have, so the look of how the information is spit out on the screen or that you can print out, is the ability to be able to sort it. That's not new in version 13, but what we've done in version 13 is also given you the ability to sort the items by supplier. So for those of you that wanted to create a report, a material report, and filter it through by supplier, so that my window supplier, my plumbing supplier, they're all separated through the individual suppliers. So maybe you have 2 different plumbing suppliers, 2 different window suppliers. Now you can separate those out in the catalog as well. So for those of you, again, using this for estimate purposes, version 13 gives you that new control so that you have even more control of the information that you're spitting out in your reports. I'm going to head now to the working drawing space. I'm going to hit on a view of one of my sheets here where I put in a floor plan and a 3D view of my model and put in some text, the word before. Something that a lot of people were asking for previous to version 13 was layering control, so that if I put in a floor plan or a picture and I wanted to put text on top of it, it wouldn't allow the text to go on top. It would always put whatever was put in first on top. So you really had to be strategic on when you were inserting things, what was going on top of each other. What we've built into version 13 is layer priority. So I'm looking at this word before. And if you look over in my catalog panel here to the right, when we're looking at the working drawing space, it becomes object properties. And that string of text has a layer called top priority that I created. And when I'm looking at that layer, if I go to other here, what's new in this dialog box is the ability to give it a priority. I'm just going to cancel it here and go into my CAD controls here. And that's this priority number right here. So my appliances have a priority of 500. There's different things with priority 999. And if I look at the layer that I created called top priority, you can see it's got a priority of 600. So as long as it's before this image and it's a higher number than that image, it's going to be on top. So if I want something to be further up and sitting on top of another image on my working drawings, I just have to make sure that that priority number is higher. So if I change that priority number right now and I make it only 100 and click OK, and change this CAD layer here and change CAD to 500, it's sitting above higher. I'm going to make that 50. By changing these around, you're changing which one's sitting above the other and which one's going to be being able to be seen above the other one. So you can make sure that the one you want to be sitting on top is at the lower priority, on the higher priority number, and the other one's down below that. So that'll be great for those of you that are organizing presentation drawings and working drawings and putting a lot of information on those sheets, and you want to make them look professional. By allowing you to have priority settings now, you can make sure that stacked items are going to stack correctly and they're going to look nice for you. Also part of sharing your models, saving your models, when we save a model now, you'll have the ability to pack and go with that model. So if I say File and Save As, see the very bottom right here, Pack Resources. Previously, before version 13, when you saved a model, it saved the model itself. And when you opened it on another computer that didn't have the same catalog, if they didn't have the same materials, if they didn't have the same line styles, those materials would just show as blank because it didn't have the correct material to show. So if it didn't have the brick 9 that I'm using in my model on that other computer, it would just show as white. Now what we do when we pack the resources, it's automatically packing up the materials that are used for that project, the line types that are being used for that project. So when you take it to that other computer, it takes those materials with you as well so that they look correct on any computer that you take them to. That's part of pack and go, packing the resources when you save a file, so that sharing that file and putting it on a different computer will also do different materials. So for those of you that have multiple CAD stations in your office, or for those of you that have maybe a computer in your office where you're doing all of your work, but then take it on a laptop on site for client visits, there's not that big a concern anymore about, do I have the same catalog? Just remember to pack and go it, pack the resources so all the materials go with it. So if you created a new material or created a new line style, you know that they're also going to go along with it. I'm going to go back to model space to profile our next new tool. And I'm going to show you by importing an object. So I'm going to go to File, Import, and go to Object Wizard. This dialog box isn't new, this routine isn't new, but what's new about this particular sphere, and this is your interior accessory, is the type of objects that we can select. We've always been able to bring in the SketchUp files, the AutoCAD drawing files, DXF, and 3D Studio files, but now we can also bring in IFC items. So this, again, will increase the availability of different objects that you can find out in the internet. IFC files are files that are created by different manufacturers and different companies so that they can be shared by all different CAD companies. And that's something that Envisioneer has always held as a goal, that the file types that we create, the files that we can import, we can share them as much as possible so that when you're using Envisioneer, you have the flexibility to use any type of file type that is given to you. And this, by creating the IFC import, this allows us to increase that even more. So I'm going to grab this IFC file and click open. And you can see that it's a staircase. I'm going to hit next to show that IFC file. This isn't anything different than what we've had before. The only real difference is now is that I can grab IFC files. So again, I have more flexibility in what I can import. And then I hit finish. And I'm just going to I'll place this to the outside and hit finish so that I can take a look out in 3D and see that staircase that we've created. So here's this wonderful green staircase that I brought in that was originally an IFC file. If I double click on it, you can see that it knows it's an interior accessory because that's how I brought it in as. I told it I wanted it to be an interior accessory. I've got the appearance tab so I can change any of the colors or the line types, add quantity information to it. So any objects that you find out on the internet or that are shared with you that are IFC files can now be brought into Envisioneer version 13. I'm going to hit File and New at this point to create a brand new file because I want to show you some even more exciting portions of being able to import an IFC file. So not only can we import a IFC object, but we can also import a whole IFC element and bring it in. So at the very bottom of the import, I've got import IFC file. So what this does is it brings in an entire project that was done in IFC. So it's telling me if I had anything else existing in this project, it's going to be wiped away by the new project that I'm opening that was originally a IFC file. And I can bring it in by color that they were originally created on or by the layer they were originally created on. So I'm going to bring in this building, this whole building that was created originally as an IFC file. So if you're working with someone that's using a different CAD package, and if they can export out in IFC format, we can now bring it in. And the exciting part about bringing in the entire IFC model is Envisioneer 13 is smart enough to know that that's a roof surface. So if I look at the properties of that, it knows it's a surface. If I look at the properties of this window, it knows that that's a window, and bringing these various elements in, that's going to be a door. So it recognizes the object and brings them in to use in the model itself. So they're all individual elements. So you could come through and change the different properties of the different objects. It knows it's a wall. Even though it's originally drawn in an alternative package and saved as an IFC file, so if you know someone using, as an example, Revit, they could save it as an IFC file. We can bring in the IFC file. We'll recognize that that's a wall. We'll recognize that that's a window, a door, a roof, so you can expand on that project as well. That's very powerful for those of you that are sharing file types with other offices. This is going to make it even easier for you. You don't have to redraw that project. You can bring that project in, and we're going to recognize that that's a wall. And then you can add framing properties to that. So it allows you to increase your flexibility of working with others but also be able to use that model intelligently. It's not just a block that it's bringing in one huge element. They're all individual elements, recognizable and can be expanded upon. There's lots of great new features in version 13. There are some that I can show you and speak about better than giving you a preview of them. So I'm just going to go back to my other model here. When we're looking at the datum lines, when I'm going out into bringing in an elevation or a section, so if I'm creating a smart view and I want to create an elevation, and previously, you could bring in the datum lines, but we didn't have which locations you could turn on and off. We've added that in for Envisioneer now, so that when you're creating that working drawing and creating that elevation, and you want to include the datum lines, but maybe you don't want the datum lines on for every location, you can say no or yes to all of your various locations now, so that it's only including the datum lines that you want. When we're looking at site boundary lines, and I'm creating a site plan, part of the new settings that we have for the site plans themselves is giving you the ability to put the boundary lines on one layer and put any kind of setback lines on an alternative layer. A lot of people asked us about putting in the different line types for those, and now you can, with your site boundaries, put those in on alternate layers as well. When we're looking at terrain and importing terrain, for those of you that are importing field recorder information, when you were bringing that information in previously from the field recorder, it would bring it in so that whatever that field recorder had set as their 0 mark was set in the software. Sometimes those field recorders have such a far off range that it was setting that site information way off your screen, and you had to grab it and bring it back. So now as part of the import process, when you're importing terrain information, it's going to center it and allow you to pick the center of where you want it to be. So that'll be a lot easier for those of you that are importing terrain from an actual field recorder and getting the accurate information right from the field recorder. We've also made many adjustments to our Envisioneer VR app. If you haven't installed the Envisioneer VR app yet, it's available up in the Apple Store and also the Google Play Store. If you download the Envisioneer VR app, and then just when you're in either one of those stores, do a search on Envisioneer VR, it'll pull up our app. What we've done is made your models available to export out to that so that you can share them. So if you haven't even heard of the app, very cool app that'll take your 3D models and put them into a virtual reality mode that you can share on your smartphone. With the current version of the VR app, navigating was by moving your smartphone around, and it looked around and panned around the room for you. What we're building into that for version 13 and the update that's going to happen to the VR app is that you'll have controls, finger controls, so that you'll be able to just swipe through the model and navigate around in that way as well. So that's quite exciting, and you'll be able to see that. Again, one of our upcoming Tuesday 2 o'clock webinars is going to be devoted to showing you the app and the features of the app so that you'll be able to sit through all of that. For those of you that have never sat through a Tuesday class before, they're very beneficial. They help you to learn a little piece of the software each week. We focus in on one topic, and we go through and learn it, whether it's roofs, whether it's foundation plans, whether it's working drawings, whether it's rendering. We talk about that one subject and hand out a booklet afterwards so you can learn a piece of the software. So I hope you enjoyed looking at all the various new features of version 13 during our webinar. What I'd like to do now, if anybody has questions about any of the features that are in version 13 and want me maybe to go over those again, I can do that. But I also like to remind you that I am sending out an email today, that will give you a link to this webinar recording. So if you wanted to watch it again to watch how a certain feature works, you can do that. And it'll also give you a link to a page on cadsoft.com where we've outlined all the various new features. And we have put those all into little videos for you to watch on the individual features or screen grab so that you can read about them. What's also on that page is going to be a little guide, so that if you are a Pro Architect client or a Building Essentials client or a Construction Suite client and are wondering, well, what features am I going to have out of all these new features that were just shown? Am I going to be able to see trusses? Am I going to be able to take advantage of those quantity reports and the different features that were put in? You'll be able to look through every single new feature will be listed, and the guide will show you which products have it and which ones won't. Okay, so I'm going to open up our chat panel and see what questions that you might have. If you did come late into today's broadcast, we're also repeating the same broadcast today at 2 o'clock Eastern time. So for those of you that are international clients, that's approximately 5 hours from now. We'll be repeating the same webinar again. The same login that you used to get into this webinar, you'll use it again for our 2 o'clock Eastern class as well. So if you didn't if you got in a little late and don't want to wait for the video recording that's coming out later today, you can sit in again at our 2 o'clock. Okay. Someone wanted me to show them the altering the material texture. So I'm just going to go back out to our model and double click on our brick. And what's different with the appearance here and looking at the brick? And I'm just going to look down here on our bricks now. What we're seeing here with the difference that I've done on just this one brick is just giving it a bump scale here. So the more you change this bump scale, watch the little preview over here to the right, you can see the difference in the actual texture. So bump mapping will make it more obvious for any indents that you have in a material, any crevices that are there, or anything that bumps out of the texture. You can see that that mortar is coming in and out. So what you do when you're doing bump texturing is you're applying that same type of texture to it, and you're telling it which parts of it to bump out. So you can see that texture control there and how we're taking that down and up there, and that mortar coming in and out a little bit more. If I come over here, I'm just going to cancel out, and I'm just going to pan over and walk up nice and close to our brick. You can see the realism now that you can have with that texture. It gives you that real look of brick, and that bump texturing allows it to come in and out, and you can make it look more realistic with the crevices and the bumping that would happen on that actual texture. Okay, our next question. Can version 13 deal with Japanese Chinese style roofs? Well, depending on the style of the roof itself, you have different controls that are available in all the different versions. So depending on the slopes that you're going to be dealing with and the actual style, if you could give us an example and send in maybe to our technical support center, the shape of the roof that you're looking to create, the style, they could probably handle it already in version 12 of the software that has the different controls, either by our automatic roof or breaking it into individual surfaces, depending on the style that you were looking for. Okay, so just depending on what you were looking for and needing in version 13 for the roof, send that into technical support. There isn't any different controls about the roof itself, but probably something like we can probably handle already, depending on what you needed. Does the truss function recognize the hip and configuration and saddle trusses over a truss run? When you're looking at the trusses itself, it's going to be looking at the surface above and the surface below it, meaning that it's going to look at the shape of the roof that you're placing it on with the truss run function, and it will recognize that I'm on a hip situation. It'll also recognize looking underneath it, the ceiling that's beneath it, and if it's a cathedral ceiling, creating that indentation in the bottom chord that it needs to for the ceiling below it. So as you're going through and doing that truss run, as you're coming up against the hip or a gable, it's going to change the configuration of the truss itself, looking at the shape of the roof above and the shape of the roof below on the truss run itself and the shape of the chord. I'm getting some, that is great, that is awesome, like the new features. There's a question about different functionalities that it includes and looking at the different functions there. Just got to get through all of the thank you, that was great. I'm glad you're enjoying it. Looking at, this will help me save time. I'm glad to hear that. Next question that's through. Are you able to install gutters and fascia with the roof function? When you're putting in the roof, it's automatically going to put in your fascia and eaves. The gutter command is a separate command in Envisioneer that you can put in separately. So it's not at the same function, but there is a gutter command that was available previously to version 13. That's a separate function. And that appears to be all the questions we have. I'm getting lots of great comments and people liking different features of it. But that seems to be all the questions that we have. So I want to thank everyone for taking your time out of your day to come to the webinar. But I also want to really thank all of you for all of the input that you give us for Envisioneer. All of the features that you see in version 13 all come from client suggestions. So if there's ever a new feature that you want in Envisioneer, we really want to hear about them. Send in your suggestions to support@cadsoft.com, and we review every single selection that comes in. And based on time availability to do certain commands, some of your commands will come in, and it's a great new feature. You might not see it in the current version, but that's because that new feature might be something that we're going to stage in over time, and it's going to take a little bit longer to program. And some features are, hey, that was great. They just want to see that section marks are in the view filter. It's going to help save them some time. Well, we can do something like that quickly, and it helps you to be efficient. So thank you to all of you that take your time out of your days to make suggestions to us. It's your suggestions that help to shape Envisioneer, and we're proud of the product that it is today because of the input that you've given us. So again, thank you for joining me today, everyone. I hope you enjoy the version 13 features that I outlined for you. They'll be coming to you in an email shortly with information about its availability later this quarter. Thanks, everybody. Have a great day. Bye-bye.